Last night, Treasurer Jim Chalmers stood up in Parliament and delivered the 2026 federal budget, and he called it the most ambitious budget in 26 years. Whether you agree with that or not, one thing is certain: it affects you. Your tax bill, your rent, your mortgage, your healthcare, and if you own an investment property, your entire financial strategy. Today we're cutting through all the noise and breaking down exactly what this budget means for ordinary Australians. No jargon, no spin, just what actually changes and when. Let's start with the good news, because there is some. If you're a worker, you're getting a tax cut. From July 1 this year, the income tax rate on earnings between $18,201 and $45,000 drops from 16% to 15%. That's worth up to $268 a year for most workers. And from July 1 next year, it drops again to 14%, worth up to $536 a year compared to current settings. On top of that, the government is introducing a $1,000 instant tax deduction for workers from this financial year. That means when you lodge your tax return, you can automatically deduct $1,000 from your taxable income without keeping receipts. For someone on average wages, that saves around $200 in tax. The government says 6.2 million workers will benefit from this. So if you're a typical Australian worker earning around $81,000 a year, these combined changes mean you'll pay roughly $1,978 less in tax in 2026-27 than you did in 2023-24. That's real money. Not life-changing, but real. Now, the headline reform, and this one is genuinely historic. From July 1st next year, negative gearing for residential property will be restricted to new builds only. Let's quickly explain what negative gearing is, because it matters. When you own an investment property and the costs of owning it, mortgage interest, maintenance rates exceed the rent you receive, you make a loss. Negative gearing allows you to use that loss to reduce your other taxable income, including your salary. It's been a cornerstone of Australia's property investment culture for decades, and it has, according to critics, contributed significantly to making housing unaffordable by giving investors a tax advantage over first home buyers. From July 2027, that advantage disappears, but only for established properties purchased after last night at 7:30 p.m. If you already own a negatively geared investment property, nothing changes for you. If you bought one before 7:30 last night, you're grandfathered in. But if you're looking to buy an existing investment property from today onwards, negative gearing won't apply. The capital gains tax discount is also changing. Currently, if you sell an investment property, you pay tax on only 50% of the capital gain. From July 2027, that 50% discount is replaced with cost-based indexation and a 30% minimum tax rate. The government says this will make the system fairer between property, investors, and ordinary wage earners. The political reaction has been fierce. The Coalition's Angus Taylor has rejected the changes entirely, saying they will hurt housing supply and push rents higher. The Greens, meanwhile, say the reforms don't go far enough and should have applied immediately without grandfathering. Almost everyone has found something to dislike, which might mean the government landed somewhere roughly in the middle. So what does this actually mean for housing affordability? The honest answer is probably not as much as either the government claims or the opposition fears. Commonwealth Bank economists have revised their house price forecasts down slightly, from 5% growth this year to 3%, partly as a result of the negative gearing changes. So the market may cool a little. But housing economists are broadly warning that restricting negative gearing alone won't fix the housing crisis. The fundamental problem is supply. Not enough homes are being built fast enough. Changing the tax treatment of investors changes demand. It doesn't build more houses. The government has addressed this with a new $2 billion local infrastructure fund to help councils and utilities build the roads, pipes and power connections that new housing developments need. That's more directly useful. But $2 billion against a national housing shortfall of hundreds of thousands of dwellings is a start, not a solution. The government says the changes will help 75,000 more Australians buy their first home over the next decade. That's about $7,500 a year. In a country where the housing shortage is measured in the hundreds of thousands, it matters, but it doesn't fix the problem. Let's talk about healthcare, because this budget spends big here. The government is putting $25 billion in additional funding into state and tertiary hospitals over 5 years, bringing the total to a record $220.3 billion. That's a significant commitment to the public hospital system, which has been under severe strain since COVID. On medicines, the government is spending $5.9 billion to list new drugs on the Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme, including treatments for cystic fibrosis, chronic kidney disease, and various cancers. COVID-19 oral antiviral medicines are being permanently added to the PBS, making them cheaper for Australians who need them. A new RSV vaccine for respiratory illness that hits older Australians particularly hard is being added to the National Immunisation Programme. That's free for eligible older Australians from later this year. For renters, the government is continuing Commonwealth rent assistance and working with states to strengthen renters' rights nationally. But if you're a renter hoping for dramatic relief from this budget, it's not there. The structural rental crisis, driven by low vacancy rates and high demand, requires more housing supply. And while the budget takes steps in that direction, the impact will take years to flow through. Here's what this budget is really about, underneath all the specific measures. Jim Chalmers described it as a budget for uncertain times, and the economic backdrop genuinely is uncertain. The Iran war has pushed oil prices higher and driven inflation up. Treasury is now forecasting inflation to peak at around 5% before coming down. The RBA has raised rates 3 times this year. Economic growth is slowing. In that environment, the government is trying to do several things simultaneously. Provide cost of living relief now, reform the tax system for the long term, invest in housing supply, and maintain enough fiscal discipline that Australia has room to respond if things get worse. Whether they've got the balance right depends on what you think the priority should be. If you're a worker on average wages, the tax cuts are welcome but modest. If you're a renter, there's not much in this budget for you in the short term. If you're a first home buyer, the negative gearing changes might help you eventually. If you're an existing property investor, you've been grandfathered and you're fine. If you're planning to buy an investment property, you need to think hard about the new tax settings. The opposition says this budget will make things worse. Higher inflation, less housing supply, more uncertainty for investors. The government says it will make things fairer and more sustainable. Both are partly telling the truth and partly spinning you. That's what budget season looks like in Australia. Here's what I take away from all of this. The tax cuts are real and they're coming. Up to $268 from July 1 this year, more next year, plus the $1,000 instant deduction. Put that in your budget now. The negative gearing changes don't kick in until July 2027, and they don't affect existing investors. But if you're thinking about buying an investment property, the tax calculus has changed significantly from last night onwards. The housing measures are steps in the right direction, but they won't fix the crisis quickly. Don't expect rents to fall or house prices to become affordable on the back of this budget alone. And if you're watching the bigger economic picture, Treasury is forecasting inflation to peak at 5% and then come down. If that forecast is right, and if the RBA feels confident enough to start cutting rates by next year, the financial pressure on Australian households should start to ease. That's the optimistic scenario. It depends on the Iran situation, stabilising and global oil prices coming down from July. A lot of ifs, but this budget is built on them. So how does this budget land for you? The tax cuts enough to make a difference? Do you think restricting negative gearing will actually help first home buyers? Or is this just rearranging chairs on a housing crisis that needs far more radical action? Drop it in the comments. This is exactly the kind of budget Australians need to debate loudly. Like and subscribe for more Australian news explained simply. See you next time.